Sorry, Nick. I was,
Uh-huh.
I was just rereading a few pages of today's book and
Oh yeah.
laugh riot it is. Ah,
Yes. I was talking to Jen, my wife, about this, and we were comparing Scandinavian versus Irish literature. She's always been greatly annoyed by the Irish tendency to be like funny, 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 sad, funny, funny, sad. She finds that really jarring. But I find sad, 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 unbelievably tragic, sad, sad, sad to be maybe a grimmer slog. Um, but I don't know.
yeah, so we're talking Before I Burn by,
Hmm.
well, here we go. I'm going to butcher the name, but you can see it before you there. So, Gaute Heivoll. How's that?
Sure.
You think?
Sounds good to me.
There we go then. Yes. So it's a it's a it's sort of a part memoir,
Yep.
um, and then also I guess a true crime story, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Yes, yeah. It definitely seems it's based on a real series of arsons that took place in southern Norway in 1978. Although, funnily enough, when I was trying to do some research, it was very hard to find any
Yes.
information
Yeah.
about the case or the arsonist or whatever, even though it's
Yes.
apparently quite well known in Norway. But yeah,
Right. But I suppose if you think about it, I mean, the yeah, the book focuses so it makes it. But then I suppose if you zoom out and you think about a series of arson attacks in which no one died in 1978 in a small part of Norway, it's not necessarily going to have a Wikipedia page, is it?
right, right.
So I'm not
And it's
that
also
surprised.
rather eclipsed, perhaps by the other set of arsonist attacks in Norway that took place in the 90s, right? All the church burnings done by black metal aficionados, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
if you
Yeah.
Google Norway arson, all you get is like stave churches on fire
You
and stuff
get
about
some
bar.
bosom.
Yes,
Right.
album covers and stuff. Yeah. Um, but yes, this is not that.
No, and also the author was born around the same time as these arson attacks, right? So,
So
so
is this true? This is the thing I couldn't figure out. I tried to try to figure out if this was just him, if the author was really interested in this thing and just inserted himself into the story so that it was kind of the strange fictional sort of or
it's an odd hybrid, isn't it? Because also at the same time, the stuff, the the reportage, as it were, I mean, is very novelistic and assumes emotions
oh
and
yeah, yeah.
things for characters that he clearly has no way of actually knowing if that was the case. So he's
Yes.
taken a lot of um artistic what's the word I'm looking for?
License?
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what you call this kind of book, really. I don't know what category you put it in exactly.
As I mean, I think it's primarily just a novel, I guess,
I
but it is
guess.
a novel
Yeah.
that is based in some historical
Yeah.
fact.
And so I was thinking that as well while reading it. I was what so I had a yeah, I have good and bad about so I'll get to the good stuff, but
Mhm.
the one thing that not troubled me exactly, but I was trying to get my head round through the majority of reading this book, which is a fairly fast read. It's not it's
Yes.
20
Yeah,
pages.
it's well written.
Yeah.
It's got some beautiful imagery.
He's a poet, right? I believe, Heivoll. Yeah, which makes
Yes, yeah.
sense. Yeah. Um, but I was wondering quite how. I mean, clearly for him, it seems to have been necessary to approach this with this framework of his own life and his own father's. Like
Mhm.
that seems to be his entry point to
Mhm.
tap into it. But as a reader, I wasn't sure exactly how much I was getting out of that frame of reference. You know what I mean? Like if it had just been
Yes.
story of the 1978,
And Dag, who was our young
yeah,
artist, basically. Well, so I tried to get the film, and I like it's not seeded well enough. Basically, I waited like 3 or 4 days,
I wasn't
and
aware there was a film.
so in 2016, the
Ah,
film Pyromanen or Pyromaniac was made by the dude who directed Insomnia, the original
ah,
Scandinavian.
I actually have a copy of it, I think.
There you
I
go.
had no idea it was. It's funny.
Yeah.
It occurred to me. I wonder if anyone's turned this into a film, and I must have not looked it up or something.
Okay, I should have got what like 2 or 3 days ago. I thought I would get it and then share it with you, but it never happened. But
Right.
I did watch the trailer.
Okay.
But anyway, to speak to your criticism, evidently the director, I can't remember his name, but the guy who also directed, as I said, Insomnia and Prozac Nation, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and they entirely remove the author. None of that stuff. The movie is very tightly based on the relationship of Dag to his parents and to the community, and none of that. It all takes place in 1978. There's none of this flashing forward and this element apparently at all.
Yeah. I was just checking my notes here. I do have a copy of that film.
Okay, so yeah, and it seems to have gotten fairly good reviews. I mean, I think it's probably as um opaque maybe as the book. So some reviewers are like, I don't understand this. What the hell is this about? Why did this kid do this? Clearly
Right.
looking for something which is the book doesn't really offer you any
Go,
clear answers to these questions, right?
Going off on a slight tangent, that director, Eric Skjoldberg, maybe,
Hmm.
he also made another good film that I saw recently based on a real life um, bank heist case. It's
Oh
called
yes, I was
No
reading about
Gas.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good, very good film. I would recommend No Gas. He also directed some episodes of, I don't know if you got around to watching the Chernobyl miniseries,
No,
which
no.
is fucking excellent.
My nephew was a huge fan of it, actually. He ended up doing
Very, very good.
to
Yeah.
research around Chernobyl as a result. But yeah. Actually the guy
Even
I
got,
will say
he's even got your man Barry Keoghan in it.
oh, there we go. This is again, let's continue with the sides. We'll get back to the
Right,
book.
yeah, yeah.
Me and my sister were talking the other night, and we suddenly realized what the fuck's going on with all the villains in Batman films being Irish guys now, and all the Batmans being English guys. Because you've got, Pattinson is our new Batman. Before
Hmm.
that, we had well, okay, I guess we had Ben Affleck, but we're not going to count him. And then we had, Christian Bale.
Well, I have an answer for you. I know why this is actually.
Okay.
I was just looking it up, and apparently, executive producer of all those news is Oliver Cromwell the Fifth.
Ah,
Yeah,
that that explains it. But I mean, just quickly list them, right? We got Liam Neeson, played the villain in Batman Begins, and then the other villain in that is Cillian Murphy, right?
yeah,
Then we've got Barry as the Joker,
right.
right? And
Colin Farrell is the
Colin,
Penguin.
yeah, Colin, yeah, as the Penguin. It's very strange.
I tell you, Ollie's back, man. Watch your back.
Okay, okay, we'll
Yeah,
do. To hell or Connacht for me. But anyway, so yeah, the actor that they have cast as the young arsonist is quite even just in the trailer, I was like, oh yeah, that guy looks
oh yeah. Okay.
because
I,
he
I'm
is.
keen to see it now, especially since I saw that Knockcast film recently. I was massively impressed by it.
Okay.
I'll pass it on I mean I will share it
Yes.
with you in a legally responsible way in which I
Hmm.
insist that you will
Hmm.
pay for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, so yeah, anyway, so yeah, there is a so apparent so to your point anyway, when they adapted it to a film, they entirely took away that third of the book
Makes
that
sense. Makes sense.
right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'm actually critical of it, of the book being like that, but I was just it's I don't know. What did you make of that aspect
So
of it? Was that
this
problematic to
this
you or
this is it. interesting. I don't know if it was occasionally my attention would wander a little bit in some of those segments. I'll admit that. And you were like, when are we going to get back to the
Like
1978
I couldn't quite make
stuff?
out what the connect. Like I thought there would be a reveal or something at some point.
Well, here's the
Like it
thing.
made
This
sense.
is not me. I read a
Right.
couple of reviews online. I think I read an NPR review and I read another one. And in one of the two reviews, it made quite a compelling case for these three young men, right? So our arsonist, our artist, right, the one who goes on to write the book, and how I don't know how you say his name, but Kare or Care or whatever, the young guy who is the ski jumper who then hurts his leg, and you know the
Oh
mudslug,
yes, yes,
right,
yes.
as being this kind of like um that the whole thing is about basically like not wanting to disappoint your parents,
Right,
and that there's and that the young guy Harry never has a chance to, because basically he dies really young, and then you know,
right.
and then and the other two disappoint their parents, I guess, right, in different ways. The author, I mean, there's a whole
Yes,
section where he doesn't tell his dad that he's dropped out of school and that he's going to become a writer, and his last act is to lie to his dying father, right? And then I do quite like that whole section where he goes and takes the ferry. I think that's a really
oh yeah,
excellent
yeah.
scene.
It's not that it's bad writing or anything. It's just I don't know. It just seemed a little shoehorned in. Like I can see like from the initial point of view how it was an entry point to telling the story, but it's
Mhm.
sometimes you know when you get to the editing process, you kind of remove the extraneous stuff.
Mhm.
So I was just wondering if it's a case, and then I was thinking, well, how would the book read without that?
Mhm.
If it was just about Dag,
Mhm.
and yeah, I'm not sure if we'd be. I don't know. It's a difficult call for me to make, but also at the same time, I'm not entirely convinced by the structure of
Right.
the book or the framing of it. Then let's put it that way.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I think
I'm ambivalent then. I'm ambivalent,
yes.
I would
Yeah.
say. But
Yeah.
yes, but some of it is fantastic. Like some of the images, like when it sticks to the story, is I mean,
Mhm.
very um it has a very strong sense of place.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I was reading this in a nice warm bath, but I was feeling a little bit chilly.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah. Me too. And actually it's interesting. A lot of what's described, it seems so similar to when I lived in like further north in Canada, right?
mm,
When I lived up like the whole scene where, again, it's one of those scenes that's actually from the author's life, where he goes hunting with his dad, and his
right.
dad, like first time he ever goes hunting, bags like this elk, right? And then the whole stripping of it and the
Yes.
stomach. I have experienced all of that firsthand when I lived on the reserve. And it was just, yeah, it was really um really evocative to me. I was like, I could smell
Right.
this
Weirdly
forest.
enough, I had a memory attached to that as well, oddly enough, because yeah, there's the whole thing of like, why does he know how to do this? I remember one time when I was, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something. It was about, I don't know, in the evening, 6 p.m. or something, and me and my parents are just at home, and there's a bump bump knock on the back door, and my father goes out the door, and it's one of his co-workers from the creamery, from the milk factory, who'd been hunting that day, and he
Hmm.
bagged like a bunch of, and he just handed him a rabbit, handed him
Yep.
a dead rabbit, and my father was, oh, okay, and I don't think this was not something my father had maybe ever done before, or I'd never, you know, nothing, we're
Hmm.
not a hunting family. But
Yep.
suddenly my dad's got this dead rabbit which stank in the
Right.
kitchen sink. He's got a knife out, he's got the bullet out, skins it, and he takes all the meat off. And we have rabbit that night. The only time
Hmm.
I've ever had rabbit in my life. It was delicious as well, I have to say. But I was like, how the fuck do you know how to do this? Like,
Yes, yeah, a childhood that we don't have access to. We don't know what
yeah,
our
I was,
parents
I was
did when they were
really
kids.
confounded by the whole. I'm still confounded by it.
My dad also went through a phase of hunting rabbits, and this is one of the things that makes me love my dad. There's two stories that make me love my dad. This is one, and they're both connected to my sisters. So he was hunting rabbits, and then basically my sisters were like, "You can't do that. You can't kill rabbits." And they're like, they're like 6 and 4, whatever, like big saucer eyes, brimming with tears.
Right,
My dad's
right.
and just goes and sells the rifle, right? But yeah, I remember that year we had a rifle in the house, which is a weird thought, even that we had, we never had a gun in the house before or after that.
From my cold dead hands, Nick.
Yes. And then the other one is I might have told this before, but my dad is very much not a guy who's quick to anger and quick to kind of like pick up a phone and start yelling at people or anything like that.
Right.
But he owns a building that he was running his garage out of in Kelowna, and one of the other tenants apparently was repeatedly like late or just not paying rent, right? And he was kind of but he was a person who clearly like could afford to, just didn't. He was very feckless and didn't give a shit, right? So finally, my dad lost it, which I've seen him do like twice in my life, and so he phones up to give this guy a bollocking, and I guess the secretary or whatever, from my dad's perspective, the secretary picks up the phone and he just unloads, starts yelling like what the fuck, like what kind of business are you running, like pay me my rent, motherfucker. And
He's a poet, your father.
yes, yeah, yeah. I doubt would have said any of that. But anyway,
I was wondering. I think Nick's
yeah, no,
some of that
my
up.
dad was, but he was angry and he was yelling.
Right.
And there's this pause. And then what comes down the other end of the phone is, Dad? And it's my sister, Melissa, who worked for a call center. And apparently, this guy's business's calls in the off hours were sent to the call center. And so my dad, the one time he finally gins up the courage to phone somebody else or phone somebody up and yell at them, he's yelling at his own child. And again,
Right.
completely just deflates and is like, oh, for fuck's sakes. Yeah. Anyway.
So oddly enough, somehow this book's infected us, and we've ended up framing our discussion
with
of
stories
the
of our own
yeah,
lives.
yes.
Shit.
How about that? Yeah.
But I will say, all the stuff with Dag is really interesting. Like what's going on? Like what's up with Dag?
Well, that's the thing as well. So yes, I suppose the other thing that may annoy some readers is, yeah, they might be expecting towards the end of the book that we might get some kind of summation of why this seemingly loyal son became an arson. I mean, there's clues because he goes off to
Yes,
like
to do military service
or something
and
at
get
some point.
sent home under cloudy circumstances that are never explained, right?
Yeah, well, he just turns up, doesn't he? Like he
Yeah.
walks home like the breadth of the country or something, and it's never really explained. So yeah, some things clearly happened at some point,
Yes.
but yeah, it's never really fully explained. Which, I mean, generally, I'm not someone who necessarily needs things tied up with a bow, and I certainly don't mind a certain amount of ambiguity, but I don't know. I would kind of like to have known a little bit more.
Right.
How about you?
Yeah, yeah, but I am okay with it because I feel like it's probably an unknowable thing in real life. I
I
suspect he
guess.
had
I
some
guess.
sort of struggle with mental illness of some kind, and it developed into this, pyromania. But
And I
okay, we
suppose
haven't,
that's what
we haven't mentioned the fact,
Heivoll's struggling with as well, which is why he drags his own life in to kind of
right?
try and make sense of it in some way.
But what really actually we haven't mentioned, so this is a kind of quite an important part of the story is so Dag's father is the like local fireman, right? Like volunteer
Yes.
fireman. And so Dag also works for the fire department. And so he's setting these fires and then in many cases showing up like an hour later with the fire department to help put them out, although in many cases the houses have been lost and the rest of it. And so this was weird to me. So the other thing that really came strongly to my mind as I read this book was the town of Penticton, British Columbia, for two reasons. One is that it has the greatest secondhand bookshop in the world, as far as I'm concerned, right? Which was owned, it is owned by my friend Tavis's family, and his dad, Bruce. He was a huge fan of Scandi kind of noir. He was the first person I knew who was reading any of that stuff, and he was the one who was saying he had this wall of just like Norwegian and Swedish crime stuff, right? And so that came to mind because this is sort of within that genre. But also Penticton in 1994 very nearly burned to the ground because a local 19-year-old son of a firefighter set a fire that basically, well, I'll read you this if I can find it here for a second. I opened it up. Yeah, the 19-year-old son of a firefighter was charged with setting a forest fire that forced the evacuation of thousands of residents in the southeastern British Columbia, officials say Friday. I won't say his name. He was taken into custody and charged in provincial court with one count of arson.
His name's on there, right? His name's on Wikipedia.
There isn't a Wikipedia entry. I had to go through newspaper. I just remember this happening I lived
Okay.
in
I just wondering why you wouldn't say his name. It's
because it turns out he's sort of so I got in contact with Tavis over this because I tried to find more information about the case.
Okay.
And I found this is interesting now. If you try to look these things up, you'll find they're almost all behind paywalls. All of these newspaper stories now you have to actually go back and subscribe to the specific newspaper. So it's very hard to tease any information out. And I had a bunch of preconceived notions about this case that I took to this book as I was reading. I was like, oh yeah, this is really interesting. And then, but I was like, before I shoot my mouth off about this with Clive in a public setting, maybe I should actually check with somebody who knows more about this than I did. So I talked to Tavis, and he did give me some much needed context for this situation. But anyway.
The Mandarin is pleased with your work. I've never been called a Mandarin before. I was oddly pleased to hear that.
The fire started July 20 and burned out of control for more than 2 weeks. It ravaged 13,600 acres, destroyed 18 homes, and forced the evacuation of nearly 3,000 residents. So it was a huge fire. It was one of the first really big fires in the Okanagan Valley, predating by about 7 or 8 years the massive ones that then raged out of control. But this one was set by this kid, and it turned out. I'd always in my mind, I'd always thought he was some sort of like heavy metal malcontent who was trying to get back at his dad.
But it was Burzum.
Basically, yes. And it turned out that no, it seemed like he was quite seriously bullied, I think, at school, and there was possibly had some other stuff going on, maybe some impulse control issues, and it was an attempt to make his dad a hero. He was going to set the fire and then call his dad up and tell his dad to come, but apparently it spread. It was tinder dry and it was perfect circumstances for a massive forest fire. So it got out of control before he could even, because this was before cell phones, so he would have had to drive back to town and and he was too shit scared by then, and then it took out a massive amount of
wow.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, this was all very much in my mind as I was reading the book, but then yes, as it turns out, it wasn't as simple, and it wasn't necessarily the same sort of psychological makeup as this character in the book, or this person, this real person that's also in the book. And the other thing I was going to say was, in reading reviews of the movie, a lot of the movie reviews talk about how although the book was written before, what was his name? The piece of shit who in Norway who murdered like massive number of people.
Yeah. The
right wing.
Yes.
Whatever. Anyway, I don't even. Who gives a shit what his name is? He was a piece of shit. Him. So a lot of people were saying that the movie in a way was almost trying to come to terms again with like, what is the psychology of somebody who is so antisocial, because later in the book, Later, 'cause at the beginning, he's setting houses on fire and stuff, and you see that just the effect of that. Like, there's some really powerfully fucking sad stuff around, particularly the old couple who've lost their son, and the house is the repository of all their memories of this beloved son who's died, and then they lose the house as well. And then the wife is also dying of something horrible, right? She's got all these terrible cramps and stuff, and yeah, that stuff
Yeah,
is just
yeah. Like I said, it's a laugh a minute.
yeah.
But also,
Uh,
no, it has to be said, some of the stuff as the fires continue and no one's quite sure, you know, where it's gonna. It really does build up a real sense of dread, right?
mhm.
Like you're not quite sure because the scenes as well where he's almost caught, but you realize like by that point is because you've heard some kind of splashing of gasoline or something, and then you go out and you're like, oh, and that all it takes is just someone flicking a match and
Yeah.
game over, right? It's just it's too late, and that stuff was almost read like a slasher novel or something like
Yes.
that, right?
Yes.
Um, don't go in the house,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, near the end, he does in fact basically attempts to burn people, like right, there's people inside right near the end, the last few arson attacks. He throws matches in like an
Yeah,
open window where he's already dumped gas in. There's a woman inside there, right? So
yeah, that's what I mean. So it's an odd. That's why I was kind of interested in maybe finding out a bit more. Not so much like, oh, why did you do these things, but I was kind of quite interested in how he's setting light to like abandoned buildings in the middle of nowhere, but then also sometimes you know people are in, so I was kind of interested in what the impetus was for like because it's usually one or the other, right?
mhm,
And it didn't seem to be an escalation either. Like one day it would be one with someone in, one with no one in, you know. So that's what
mhm,
I kind of would have liked to have known a bit more about was, and again, I suppose you can't make it up. Like if he didn't say, then he didn't say, right? We don't
mhm,
know why. But I would have, I don't know, a bit of speculation about that, or would have been interesting
mhm,
because it's one thing to be an arsonist,
mhm.
right? And it's another thing to be a murderer, right? I mean, they're both
Yeah.
fairly antisocial activities, but
Yes, yeah,
but there is still a distinction, right?
yeah.
But some people do burn shit. They like burning shit, um, but they wouldn't necessarily harm.
Deliberately try to kill
Yeah,
somebody. Yeah,
yeah,
there's an interesting unless that sound that the book comes back to is really intoxicating. They mentioned a few times about a weird keening noise that seems to come from a house at a certain point of the
right.
burning process, and maybe he just got really addicted to whatever that was.
Yeah,
But
I can see. No, there's a definite. That's the book's strongest suit is definitely just the almost documentary. Well, as a weird mixture of very documentary like reportage, but like you said, through the words of a poet, right? So
mhm,
so yeah, I have a very strong sense of being in that rural place at
right.
night, kind of stark, proper
Mhm,
black, white night snow
yeah.
contrast chiaroscuro world
Mhm,
where suddenly there's like
yeah.
um that must be terrifying. That must be terrifying for it.
Have you
Just
ever
over
been
here,
close?
another one. Like there's one night where
Yeah,
it sets a whole bunch of
like 8 fires in one
yeah,
night or
and that
whatever.
must be like, holy fuck, where's it gonna happen next?
Mhm,
Which is interesting because I don't tend to think of obviously if you're in a fire, it's a scary thing, but it's a difficult thing I think to write fires as like I said, almost like a slash, like because you don't,
yes.
yeah. So that's quite
Like
the achievement. So even though the book in some other ways has kind of some not feelings exactly, but I can't quite get my head around why it is the way it is for those scenes alone, it's definitely worth like it's extremely evocative. Those scenes will stay with me. I'll remember
oh
those.
yeah. Have you ever seen like a house fire?
I think, have you ever set a house on fire?
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever flicked a match at a lady
Well,
through
now that the
a window?
statute of limitations have run out, I'm trying to think actually. That's a
Because it's a
very
very jarring thing when
very good. I've seen bodies burned, like,
right.
but I'm trying to think if I've
You
seen a
might want to explain that. You might not, but you might, I know what you're talking about, but we're just going to leave that out there. Um,
how.
okay.
I feel as if I must have done, but then thinking about it, I'm thinking, where would I have seen? So maybe no, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, you?
So a couple, yeah, about 6 years ago, I was driving back from the school. I was teaching at a school quite far out in the countryside, and I was coming back to the big city of Charlottetown at night, and I saw this kind of glow on the horizon a little bit, and then I got closer and closer, and suddenly I realized that there was this house quite near the road that was fully engulfed, and it was like a two-story, quite a sizable sort of farmhouse, not like a yeah, I guess like a house owned by a farm, not like a barn, but like so a proper house. And it was nighttime, right? It was winter time, and so it was crazy. Because it was just an inferno. And I remember thinking, oh shit, I hope nobody's hurt. And it turned out I got to school the next day, and it was the family home of one of my students, and everyone was all right. No one was hurt. But I remember thinking like, wow, it really is quite a jarring thing to see. And then I think the other thing that really strikes me is I have never thought about it before, but it's really set up a real fucking paranoia in me now after reading this, having just bought a house, and that feeling of like you do put a lot of yourself into it in terms of just you have shared memories. You have a lot of,
Yeah,
it's your fortress against the world, right? And so the idea, especially of being like an old person and like you're near death anyway, and then you lose this place. I don't know. It was really, really powerfully sad. All those segments dealing with the people like the victims, I guess, right?
right.
And then he writes them letters later, like after, because he only does like what a couple of years in a mental institution
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
out again, which I'm assuming is probably what really happened.
Yeah, and seems to have gone back to society and
Back to the
not
town, which is what's
not
most
caused any more
amazing.
trouble. Yeah, collected refuse and rubbish
Yes,
and stuff, right? Yeah,
yes, yeah,
he became the bin man,
yeah.
basically. Um,
Yeah, bizarre. But I mean, there's a quote from quite near the end of the book, and it's from one of those sections again where it's like it's more about the author's life, and he's talking about his granddad. Now his granddad became like um he started to work on the city trains like long like in his 70s or something like that. And then they took a picture of his granddad, and it was on like the postcards in the town for years afterwards of his granddad like next to this train, and
right.
how he was kind of embarrassed about the whole thing, and like other kids like what would they say about his granddad. Um and then this little quote that there's a when you're a kid, and I lived with my granddad. He lived in the house with us, right? And there is an element of like you love your granddad.
Batman hating granddad.
Yes, my Batman hated granddad. Yeah, you love your granddad because he's your granddad, and he buys you sweets and stuff from
Doesn't
like the
let
shop.
you watch Batman, but
He doesn't know. No, you do have to watch a lot of sheepdog trials and darts. But yeah. But obviously, there's like something vaguely embarrassing about, you know, your doddering old granddad. And so there's this part in the book, quite near the end, where it just says, the postcards with granddad stayed on display even after he was gone. I remember it well because by then the pride and embarrassment had let go of each other. So he's talking about how he's proud of his granddad and also embarrassed of him at the same time.
hmm,
Which is again a feeling that I think is really, for me, seems very real. Um, yeah. So because by then the pride and embarrassment had let go of each other, and inside of me there was a silent candle that hurt. I was like, fucking hell. I
hmm.
don't know why, but that was really quite this idea of this little guttering flame of memory of like a loved one. Um, that's some really sad writing. Thanks, Scandinavia. Thanks for that image. That's been haunting me for days since I read that for some reason. This idea of the people I've lost as these little guttering candles inside.
Yeah. So there we go. On our run up to Christmas, if you want some chuckles,
Hmm.
stick before I burn into someone's stocking. Um, No, it's definitely, yeah, like we said, it's an interesting read for sure, and an easy read, and it has, I don't know if it has problems or not, but it's strong enough, isn't it? It's evocative enough.
There's
It's
enough in there. There's enough meat on the bone, and there's enough imagery. I think that it's worth reading just for that alone, for those
yeah,
images.
yeah. I'm glad we kind of stumbled across, because it's again, it's one of those books. I have no idea why I can't remember at what point this book entered my consciousness. I must have read about it somewhere or heard
Mhm.
about it, stuck it on the, like, what happens sometimes is, because I have a terrible short-term memory, is I have a, it doesn't work all the time, but I have kind of a little bit of a system, because my book list is categorized and it's too huge and unwieldy. But sometimes when I because there's a lot of things you think like, I should read that, or
Mhm.
that's quite interesting, but every now and again you read about something and it's like,
Yeah, that's
gotta
next.
read that, or gotta read that and talk about it with Nick or something. And so I kind of have a space that I put those things in. I have a list, and it was just there, and I go
Mhm.
there often, and but I forget why they're there. But I
Mhm.
trust my own prior judgment to. So that's why this went up to the top of the list, and and yeah, I think it kind of paid dividends, right?
Mhm.
I think the list seems to be work. I mean, we haven't come across anything like, what the fuck are we reading this yet from the list?
No,
So
no.
yeah,
I'm really thinking now your Christmas idea makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking this Christmas I'm going to build a gingerbread house and do all the icing and then set fire to it.
yeah. You should do it on here as well. Like, we can
Yeah,
watch.
yeah, yeah. We'll do it live.
Yeah,
Then accidentally burn my own house down. It'll be
yes,
perfect.
yes, and then I will write a memoir about it. But it'll
Yes.
but it'll be about when my father died, and
Yes.
I'll drag
Yes.
that in.
And the rabbit, you'll want
Yeah,
that rabbit story in there for
and
sure.
it'll be another laugh riot, just like this.
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
Right. Let's bugger
Right.
off then, Nick.
Right. Let's do that.